My boss looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're replaceable. Never forget it." He didn't shout it. He didn't slam his fist on the table. He said it in this quiet, almost bored tone, like he was reminding me to lock the door on my way out. The room was so silent I could hear the cheap wall clock ticking behind me. 5 other people pretended to keep looking at their laptops. No one met my eyes. I remember staring at the blue glow of the conference room screen, my own report still frozen there. I'd just spent 3 weeks fixing a mess he'd created with a client proposal. I'd pulled 2 all-nighters, missed my brother's birthday, and patched together a solution that literally saved a 6-figure account. And that was the sentence I got. I didn't argue. I didn't say something clever back. I just said, "Noted," and closed my laptop. On the outside, I probably looked calm. On the inside, something very small and very important quietly snapped. Let me back up for a second. I worked in a mid-sized consulting company. Nothing glamorous. We weren't changing the world. We were fixing other people's spreadsheets and systems and processes. I was the guy they called when something is broken, but we don't know what. Officially, I was a senior analyst. Unofficially, I was the person who knew where every file lived, why every workaround existed, and which client would explode if you touched the wrong field. My boss, Carter, loved to say he ran the show. He was one of those guys who looked like LinkedIn had spat him out. Expensive haircut, perfectly fitted shirts, watch that cost more than my car. He never opened a dashboard in his life, but he talked in big words. Strategic synergy, value alignment, holistic pipeline. He took credit when things went right and went hunting for throats when they didn't. For a long time, I told myself that was just how this world worked. You have the face people remember and the hands doing the work behind the curtain. He was the face, I was the hands. Simple. The first time he crossed the line was small. Little comments in weekly meetings. "Evan, you're good with details. Try not to drown in them. Evan, you don't need to explain everything. Just make it work. Evan, we don't pay you to have opinions in front of clients." Always with that little half smile, like he was giving friendly advice, while everyone else pretended it was normal to talk to someone like that. Then the late nights started. He'd schedule client calls for 5:30 p.m. and drop by my desk at 5:15 with, "Hey, I told them we'd have a prototype to show. You can whip something up, right? You're fast." I wasn't fast. I was thorough. But thorough became fast when his promises outpaced reality. So I stayed. 9, 10, midnight. My name wasn't on any of the slides, but his voice was presenting them the next morning like he'd come up with everything over coffee. People noticed quietly. The dev guy would leave me an extra Red Bull on my desk when he left. The receptionist would shake her head when she turned off half the office lights and saw mine still on. A couple of times, our HR manager walked past at 9 p.m. and just said, "Still?" under her breath, but no one said it to him. The week that broke, everything started like any other. Monday morning, Carter sent a cheery all-hands email. "Big push this week, team. Let's show our new investors what we're capable of. Evan, looping you in on the Helix account. We promised a revised system architecture by Friday. You're the best, man." Helix was already a disaster. Their old vendor had left their data in a mess, and I'd warned Carter 2 months earlier that the timeline he'd promised them was tight, even for a full team. Instead, it was just me and a junior, who'd started 3 weeks ago and still asked where the printer was. By Wednesday, I'd slept maybe 9 hours total. My eyes felt like sandpaper. The junior had done his best, but I'd had to redo half of it because Carter insisted on no rough edges before anything touched a client inbox. Wednesday night, I was still in the office at 10:40 p.m., staring at error logs, when the cleaner came by. "You're still here?" she asked, pausing with the trash bag. "Almost done," I lied. "Your boss must love you," she said. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure love was the word. By Friday morning, the architecture was done. Documented, tested, packaged. I sent Carter a message at 8:17 a.m. Helix doc is in the shared folder. Final V6, ready to present. He didn't answer. At 9 a.m., he walked into my cubicle, clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make my monitor shake, and said, "Knew you'd pull it off. You're solid, man." That was the closest thing to "thank you" I'd heard in months. At 11:30, we had the internal review meeting before the investor presentation. Just management and leads. I wasn't even supposed to be in it, but one of the project managers pulled me into the conference room. In case there are technical questions. I walked in with my laptop, nodded to a few people, and took a seat near the end of the table. Carter was at the head, of course. He opened the deck I'd prepared and started clicking through it, like he'd written every line. "This is the revised Helix architecture," he said. "I've been working with the team on this all week." A couple of people glanced at me. I ignored it. Halfway through, one of the directors asked a very specific question about a risk in the data migration step. Carter froze for half a second, just half, then turned his head to me. "Evan, why don't you explain your thinking there?" he said, like he was generous enough to give me a moment on stage. So I did. Calmly, clearly. I walked them through the failure cases, the backups I'd built in, the way we could roll back if anything went wrong. No jargon, no drama. Just the work I'd been drowning in all week. The director nodded. "Good, solid. We can show that to the investors." Nice work. Carter smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The praise had landed in the wrong direction. When the meeting ended, people started closing laptops, standing up chatting about lunch. Carter waited. He watched everyone leave until it was just him and me in the room. He closed the door with a quiet click. "Evan," he said, turning back to me, "can I give you some feedback?" I already knew this script. "Sure." He leaned against the table like we were buddies. "You're smart. No one's questioning that. But you need to remember your place in the room." "My place," I repeated. "Yeah. I don't bring you to these meetings so you can talk like you're running the show. You answer what you're asked. You don't decorate it. You made me look like I didn't know my own proposal." I felt a tired laugh rise in my chest and forced it back down. "I answered the question they asked," he shrugged. "You over-answered. There's a difference." I looked at him, really looked at him. The expensive watch, the shirt I recognized from an Instagram ad, the guy who's never once stayed past 7 telling me I'd done too much of the work he'd put my name on. "That architecture doesn't exist without me," I said quietly. "You know that." He smiled then. Not friendly. Almost amused. "Evan," he said in that soft, patronizing voice he saved for when he wanted something, "everyone is replaceable. You're replaceable. Never forget it." The clock ticked behind me. Someone laughed down the hallway. A door slammed far away. None of it felt real. I packed my laptop into my bag. Zip. Smooth. My hands didn't shake. "Noted," I said again. He looked satisfied, like he'd put me back in whatever box he thought I belonged in. He picked up his phone. Already done with me. Thumbs flying across the screen as I walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the handle, just for a second. Up until that morning, I'd believed that if I worked hard enough, if I was useful enough, people like him would eventually see it and treat me fairly. That sentence, "You're replaceable," did something his yelling never could. It made me stop trying to be the hero in a story that wasn't mine. He moved the planning meeting 5 minutes earlier than usual. It felt like a signal. That thin, uncomfortable kind when someone is about to stage a public performance. I walked into the conference room last and took a seat near the wall, hoping it would give me at least the illusion of distance. But illusion is a luxury that Carter destroyed quickly and gladly. He started with the small stuff. The Helix presentation was not flexible enough. The diagrams were too complicated. The wording was too heavy for the client. I listened as I felt people around the table quietly glance at me, checking to see how much of it was landing. But that was only the warm-up. "We're behind on all 3 fronts," he said, clicking to the next slide so hard it sounded like he was punishing the screen itself. "And, as always, It all comes down to the technical team. Then he looked straight at me, calm, precise, like I was the problem. Evan, he said, explain to the team why deadlines are at risk again. I lifted my eyes. The deadlines are at risk because you promised features that don't exist. The room went dead silent. Everyone froze. Even the air conditioner seemed to quiet down. Carter leaned forward. You saying I don't understand what I'm selling? I'm saying you're selling something that still needs to be built, and built faster than is physically possible. He smiled. That slow, thin, dangerous smile of a man who truly believes he's untouchable. Did everyone hear that? He said, turning to the room. We've got a new chief engineer here. Congrats to Evan. He decided today that he knows better than everyone else. Someone gave an awkward laugh. Someone stared into their laptop. No one said a word. I wanted to leave, but he wasn't done. And since Evan thinks I'm promising the impossible, he clicked to the next slide, a list of tasks I'd never seen before. He's taking all of this, today, right now, end of the week. I stared at the screen. There were items from integration, DevOps, QA, even a marketing block that had nothing to do with me. That's not my scope, I said quietly. It is now, he replied. And Evan, he paused, head slowly lifted around the room. Please don't fail. You wouldn't want to prove how replaceable you really are. So quickly. That wasn't a slap anymore. It was a public execution, and that was the moment something shifted inside me. The anger faded, replaced by something colder, calculating, quiet. Not the kind of feeling that screams, the kind that counts. I closed my folder, turned off my laptop. Fine, I said. I'll do everything you want. He nodded, satisfied, but that was only the beginning. After that, everything accelerated faster than I could mentally keep up with. First came the Slack messages. Midnight. Carter, 12:04 a.m. Status. Carter, 12:11 a.m. Awake. Carter, 12:29 a.m. Need update. Now I didn't respond. He knew I'd seen them. That's exactly what made him furious. The next day he staged an unscheduled inspection, walked into our department, leaned against a cabinet, and announced loudly across the open office, if anyone thinks they're too valuable to follow orders, that's a mistake. No one here is irreplaceable. Understand? Several eyes flicked toward me, fast, almost guilty. Some were ashamed. Others were just scared the target might shift to them next. That afternoon, he summoned me to his office. A stack of papers lay on the desk. This? He pointed at them. You didn't finish. I flipped through the documents. They weren't mine, not even close. These belong to integration, I said. They're not under me. They are now? Why? Because I decided so. He leaned back in his chair. And as long as you work for me, you do what I tell you to do. Simple. His voice was calm, cold, radiating total certainty that he owned everyone in the building. And that's when the thought formed for the first time. What if he was wrong? That evening, HR sent an email, and I suddenly saw the pattern. Company acquisition finalized, process and leadership audit scheduled for next week. Audit, leadership audit. The office went silent. Even typing slowed down. Carter had seen the email, too. I watched him walk out of his office, sit on the edge of the sales desk, pretend to joke with someone. But his shoulders gave him away. His eyes were glued to his phone, waiting for a call, afraid. And that fear made him push harder, because if anyone talked, he was finished. Breaking me seemed easier than fearing me. That night he messaged again. Carter, 1:03 a.m. You think today went well? Carter, 1:04 a.m. Don't make me repeat myself. Carter, 1:05 a.m. Finish what I gave you. I stared at the screen, and suddenly I realized I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. I wasn't a hero suffering for the team. I was a man who finally understood he'd been trying to save people who didn't want saving. That was the moment I stopped being the hero. And I understood something else too. He believed I was replaceable. He believed I had no options. He believed his power was permanent. But that choice cost him everything. I didn't plan revenge that night. I just wanted the noise to stop. But the moment I closed my laptop and shut off the office lights, the hallway felt different. Too still, like the kind of silence that means something has finally snapped out of place. I stood there in the dark, coat in hand, realizing I had reached the end of whatever rope Carter thought he was holding me by. I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I was done. And when a man is done, truly done, he stops negotiating with pain. Outside, the parking lot buzzed under cheap fluorescent lights. My phone vibrated again. Another Slack message from Carter. We talk 8 a.m. Come prepared. Prepared for what? Another empty threat? Another round of public humiliation? Another pile of impossible work he'd slap my name on and then blame me for? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I opened my contacts. There was one person, one who needed to hear what had been happening. Someone I never expected to matter again. Someone Carter had met just once and insulted publicly, thinking he was just some random consultant. He wasn't. He was the new majority investor. And he remembered me. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Evan, that you? His voice was calm, like hearing from me at 10 o'clock at night wasn't strange at all. I took a breath. Hey, I think you should know something before next week's audit. Silence on the line. Not the awkward kind, the focused kind. Go ahead, he said. I didn't dramatize, didn't exaggerate. I laid out the facts like I'd lay out a system diagram. Concise, structured, undeniable. What Carter promised clients. What he forced employees to hide. The working hours he demanded without reporting them. The decisions he made that put the Helix contract and the entire company at risk. The harassment, the threats, the manipulation. And then I told him the part that made him exhale sharply. I have documentation. Clean. Dated. Complete. Everything you'll need for the board. He asked one question, voice quiet. Did he really tell you that you were replaceable? Yes, I said. After I delivered the system he sold behind my back. Another long silence. Then, Evan, thank you. Send me everything. Tonight. I sent it. 5 minutes later, he called back with a tone I'd never heard from him before. Controlled, decisive, final. I'll handle it. Go home. Don't engage with him again. And Evan? Yeah? You're not the one who's replaceable. I didn't realize how tightly I'd been holding my jaw until that moment. Something in me loosened, just slightly, but enough to breathe again. I slept for the first time in days. The storm broke at 6:42 the next morning. I walked into the office to find HR clustered, whispering near the elevators, eyes wide, voices low. People were checking their phones and glancing toward Carter's closed door like they were waiting for an explosion. No one knew anything yet. I did. At 7:03, 2 men in suits, private security from corporate, walked past me and straight into Carter's office without knocking. The door shut. Locked. A ripple went through the office like a shockwave in the air before thunder. 5 minutes later, the shouting began. Not from the suits. From Carter. His voice was sharp, panicked, cracking. Nothing like the controlled, smug tone he used when he was holding other people's livelihoods over their heads. Papers hit the wall. Something crashed to the floor. People froze at their desks. Someone whispered, "What's happening?" I didn't answer. I already knew. The volume rose. "Bullshit! Who sent that? This is a setup. You can't do this." Then silence. The kind of silence that means something irreversible just happened. They walked him out at 7:19. No jacket, no laptop, no confidence left in his face. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, and for the first time since I'd known him, he didn't make eye contact with anyone. Not even the people he used to bark orders at, not even me. He just stared straight ahead while the entire floor watched the man who thought he owned everyone be escorted to the elevator like he was a stranger who wandered into the wrong building. When the doors closed, HR exhaled like they'd been holding their breath for years. Someone clapped once, then a second person. Then the whole room erupted, not loudly, but in this quiet, stunned relief. People weren't celebrating his suffering. They were celebrating the end of theirs. I stood at my desk, hands in my pockets, watching the last crack of chaos settle into something like justice. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. And the day wasn't over yet. I didn't feel triumphant the morning after Carter was removed. I felt quiet, like the world had finally stopped shouting long enough for me to hear my own thoughts again. The office, usually tense by 9 a.m., felt strangely weightless. People spoke softer, smiled easier, moved like someone had loosened the tight screws holding us together for too long. But the real shift didn't hit until 10:12. That was when the new investor, the same man Carter insulted weeks earlier, walked onto our floor with HR carrying a manila folder. Not a presentation, not a company-wide statement, just a folder. He stopped by my desk. "Evan, got a minute?" My stomach tightened. Not from fear, just from the surrealness of it all. We stepped into a small conference room, and he closed the door. He didn't sit at the head of the table. He sat next to me. "First," he said, "thank you. You saved this company from a financial and legal disaster. I don't take that lightly." I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. He placed the folder on the table and opened it, revealing a restructuring plan. Signatures already stamped. "I'm appointing a new director of technical operations," he said. "Someone who understands the systems, the clients, the people. Someone the team already trusts." I waited for the name. He looked directly at me. "It's you, if you want it." I let the words sit there, giving them room to breathe, checking myself for any hesitation. There wasn't any. Just clarity. "I'll take it," I said. His smile was small, but real. "Good. Let's build something sane here." When he left, I stayed in the empty room for a moment, letting the weight of everything settle. Not heavy, just final. News spreads fast in an office. By noon, people kept stopping by my desk with small smiles, pats on the shoulder, quiet congratulations. Not the loud, performative kind, the relieved kind. One of the devs, usually shy, barely speaks above a whisper, murmured, "It's better without him," like he was afraid saying it out loud might jinx it. "It will stay better," I promised, because now it could. At 3:30, I went to Carter's old office. The door was open. The desk was empty except for a few forgotten paper clips and a broken phone charger. His nameplate was gone. The air felt cleaner, like it finally had permission to circulate. I walked inside only because I needed to confirm something. Nothing in this room belonged to him anymore. Not the fear he'd cultivated, not the pressure he'd used as leverage, not the shadows he'd left behind. Everything that mattered had left with him. I closed the door, not as a statement, just as a way of sealing a chapter. The rest of the week unfolded in a rhythm the office had never known. Peaceful, focused, almost gentle. People actually laughed. Meetings ran shorter because no one was performing dominance for the sake of it. Work wasn't easy, but it was honest, and that was enough. On Friday, as I packed up to head home, the new investor stopped by again. "Big weekend plans?" he asked lightly. "Sleep," I said. "Maybe groceries." "That's a good start. And Evan?" "Yeah?" He smirked. "You're not replaceable. Don't forget that." I shook my head with a quiet laugh. Noted. When I stepped outside, the air felt crisp, cooler than it had all week. I took the long way to my car, letting myself enjoy the simplicity of a walk without tension sitting on my shoulders. For the first time in months, my phone stayed silent in my pocket. No midnight messages, no threats disguised as deadlines, no sudden urgent tasks that existed only because someone needed to feel powerful. Just peace. At home, I unlocked the door and set my bag down in the hallway. The house felt different, not because anything had changed physically, but because I had changed. I wasn't carrying the job like a burden anymore. I was just living again. I made dinner. Simple food. Sat at my table. Ate without rushing. No laptop open beside me. No Slack notifications lighting up the screen. Just dinner. Afterward, I stood by the window, watching the street settle into its evening rhythm. A dog barked somewhere down the block. A couple laughed as they walked past. Life was moving, steady and unbothered. It felt good to be part of it again. People think satisfaction comes from watching someone fall. It doesn't. It comes from knowing you finally stood up. Carter lost his job because of his own choices. I didn't take anything from him that he hadn't already destroyed himself. All I did was stop holding the structure up for him. The company didn't collapse. He did. And I walked away with something far more valuable than a title or recognition or even justice. I walked away clean. No bitterness, no noise, no unfinished business. The story ended exactly where it needed to. And for the first time in a long time, I sat in the quiet and realized something simple. Something true. Peace isn't dramatic. It's just the absence of someone else's chaos.